Tag TV and Tag Radio be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio, there's a lot more to know. It can be managed, accumulated, and traded in for trust. Legitimization of a position of power and social recognition, a premium price for goods and services offered, higher loyalty, a stronger willingness among shareholders to hold on to shares in times of crisis, or even a stronger readiness to invest in the company stock to begin with. Reputation, one of the most valuable forms of capital of a company. It's a competitive advantage because it attracts customers to products, investors to securities, and employees to its jobs. It is built from acting reliably, credibly, trustworthily, and responsibly in the market. It can best be sustained by effective public relations. Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, October 8, 2013, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. I'm your guest host, Frank Baia. From its inception, technology has been the driver for this firm's actions in the startup movement of 2005. Today it counsels the Atlanta Technology Village and the Atlanta Technology Angels, one firm, headquartered in Atlanta that specializes in communications, social, and public relations, one firm that has built a reputation strong enough to be in just 10 years the fourth fastest growing agency in the United States by sustaining the reputation of its roster of clients and with both industry associates and loyal employees. Up to the Tech Talk, an industry reputation across 20-plus years of a career in marketing and public relations that has allowed Genna Keller to counsel countless brands that have delivered industry-setting technology and services. Genna Keller, principal and founder of Trevelino Keller, has made an indelible mark on the technology landscape. In the 90s, she began her career with Alexander Communications, the then Atlanta-headquartered technology powerhouse firm later acquired by global giant Ogilvy PR. Genna, post-acquisition, rose to run the firm's Atlanta and New York tech practices and was managing director of the Atlanta office. In 2004, joining with long-term colleague Dean Trevelino, they founded what was to become Trevelino Keller Communications Group, now with offices in Atlanta, Charleston, and Washington, D.C. Today, a national boutique agency recognized as the agency of choice for emerging and established companies based in the Southeast with a national or international footprint. Join today's Tech Talk for a unique perspective on the changes in the tech landscape over the past few years. From keeping up with the evolving industry and the Atlanta tech mecca she has helped to nurture to the out-of-the-box concepts yet to unfold. It's a Tech Talk on reputation from a woman who has earned her reputation as a top PR industry executive and one of Atlanta's tech community's driving forces, founder and principal, Trevelino Keller, Genna Keller. Genna, welcome to Tech Talk.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here today.
Well, I think probably one of the great opportunities that we have on Tech Talk is we get to go kind of behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz kind of thing, and get to talk to the wizards themselves. In this case, having an opportunity to talk to one of the top public relations, marketing, and advertising consultants probably in the last couple of decades. Certainly don't want to date you, but certainly in the last decade. You've seen a heck of a lot of changes, been part of a lot of changes that have happened in Atlanta and the greater technology industry. Let's talk a little bit about maybe where things were just a few decades ago. Let's go 10 years back. I won't date yourself and mine. I know we can go back to how rapidly things are changed. But let's say in the last, 10 years, certainly the technology industry has changed. But let's talk a little bit about media itself. How have you seen that transition, and literally how have you kept up with it?
Sure. Media certainly has transitioned in the last 10 years. Within the last decade, we've had the birth of the blog. Digital media wasn't a term that was defined or used, and certainly social media was not around at the start of the most recent decade. And now all of those are being used and employed every single day by enterprise tech companies, startup tech companies. Every single day within our agency, we learn of new digital technologies, new social technologies, new social media, if you will. And, we're keeping up as best we can. it's amazing how rapidly it is evolving. It's amazing how rapidly these channels can impact your overall communication strategies because information is instantaneous. It's also measurable, which is great, and marketers can, look at channel by channel, message by message, and see what is working and what is not. We love that. We love being able to course correct, test A/B messages, all of those types of things that used to take months and months to get out into the market and know was it working. We now know immediately.
Well, let's talk a little bit. I'll describe it as a tsunami. I think it's a case where there's so many things, as you're talking, just jokingly, you could put any kind of description, exponential and dynamically fluid. When you're dealing in the situation where trust becomes such a major factor, where obviously for many years you understood the jungle, you understood the course, you knew the path. In many cases, it was the same basic not technologies, but the same basic knowledge implemented in maybe different verticals of various private enterprise, let's say. But in the case now where so many things happening so quickly, how do you get a grip on the things that you feel are going to have the kind of traction that you would recommend versus something that might just be a fad?
Well, I think you have to look at it from a higher level, and it's very easy to get caught up in the tactics and the dynamics of wanting to use the new thing or the new buzzword, or use the right nomenclature, the right channel. But, we 100% believe that the most important thing that any company can have, whether you're a startup technology company or you're established and have been around, for years, it's your reputation. And, companies have to embrace that, and they have to understand what you do to preserve your reputation. If you've been around a while, what you need to do to protect your reputation, what you need to do to promote it if you're building a new brand or a new offering. And those things have never been more apparent than in what we call, the social economy. Good news travels fast, bad news travels faster from the social media channels. So if you go up and you don't get caught up in all of the different channels and the technologies that are available to use it, but you think more strategically of, what is my reputation and how do I keep a good one? It will help everything. It will help with sales and marketing. It will help with hiring. It will help with your stock price. It just makes everything a little bit easier.
Do you ever get involved with a client from the standpoint of, let's use the analogy, are you an application or are you an economy? Things have rapidly morphed into hybrids, and there obviously acquisitions happen on almost a rapid scale. When you're dealing with VC, you'll often hear them talk about flipping rather than investing in something for the long term. I know you guys have been involved in the startup movement since, 2005, and actually, if I remember correctly, Startup Council, which is part of what you guys created, and obviously now the Atlanta Tech Village you guys are consultants for. Talk a little bit about the whole aspect of how quickly ideas, innovation is turning into companies and how those companies get handled from a marketing and public relations standpoint when there's things like such rapid mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's sort of back to the future a little bit with the startup world now. If you remember the late 90s, the amount of activity that was going on then, we certainly are not quite at that frenzy, if you will, but it feels pretty good out there. We're seeing increased activity in terms of new companies forming. We're seeing more and more resources for these new companies, whether it's incubators, whether it's resources, whether it's funds, whether it's, new programming and alliances with academia in the area. But, one of the things that we're seeing that we're really excited about for the entire ecosystem around the region is we're seeing more and more strategic partnerships with these established tech companies and the emerging tech companies. And, we think that really can bring scale at a much faster pace. The emerging companies, by these strategic partnerships, and some are acquisitions, they're getting innovation. They're getting, a fast path to innovation and resources that they just can't do internally. And the emerging companies, of course, are getting some depth and breadth that they don't necessarily have overnight. And we love seeing the marriage of those two. I think the appetite has certainly increased with the with the established players to partner more and more aggressively with the emerging players.
Well, I can remember Garage.com, and probably most of our listeners will remember the fact that the comment was that somebody was in a garage next door that was doing the same thing you were, and if you didn't get to the market quick enough, you were going to be second or third in market, and you're not going to get your share. I think now it's a case where there's so many new ideas and so many innovations. You wonder how some of the incubators or the venture capital type situations really don't communicate with each other, because I think sometimes there's multiple players. And look at the space of healthcare, for example, and what's happening in the whole space of mobile and the impact of cloud over the aspect of telemedicine and those kind of things. Certainly, the technology is pervasive in that area, and I think there would be a lot of people that are maybe chasing after the same vision that really don't know what the next person is doing. I guess where I'm leading to is, when you, in an earlier time, we would have called it a situation analysis. How do you get a grip on the marketplace when you're talking about dealing with a new client?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Oftentimes we'll talk to new companies and we'll ask, who's your competition? And when they say no one, we have to smile, because that's just not true. There always is someone, and in fact, even with the VCs, they want there to be someone that can help kind of prove the market.
A little worried if there isn't.
Yeah,
exactly. The reason why they're doing it.
Exactly. So market assessment, back to your original question of, the media, and how much information is out there, it's easier than ever to get some intelligence. It absolutely is easier than ever to get some intelligence about the space that you're trying to penetrate. You can, if you know your audience, you can certainly learn a lot about them from, all of these resources that are out there on this vast, digital platform we call the Internet. You can find out their likes, dislikes. You can find out where they are. You can find out what associations that they're involved in. You can find out an awful lot of data. There's a lot of free big data out there when it comes to that. We still certainly do, though, love some of the traditional methods like analyst relations, industry analyst relations.
Yeah.
Some companies come to us and haven't a clue or have a little bit of data, but know they need to go deeper. We're certainly not shying away from, the good old industry analysts. They can add an awful lot of value. That's their job. That's their job, to size markets, and, they see companies and data every day.
Well, I'm not sure the terminology you use to describe it, but there's a demand. We used to say push and pull. I mean, you can market through the system and try to push a product through, or you could pull a product through based on your advertising expenditures and cost per impression. I mean, I got to be dating myself by talking about that. I don't know what we call it nowadays, but and I can almost remember the first time I heard big data, which is probably it seems like only several days ago, and now all of a sudden it's an old term.
Now big data is the big deal, right?
Well, we're now pattern detecting. I like that.
Yeah, and data analytics. We're doing it all.
Well, it kind of brings up the next point, and that is when you've got a situation. You talk about certainly it's an economy of information, and one would argue that probably the biggest challenge is getting attention, not necessarily finding out about a company per se, but how do you break through the clutter and really make enough noise to get an impact? But I guess really one of the things I'd be curious from your perspective is, how do you figure out if a product is creating a marketplace that hasn't even existed yet? It's solving a problem or providing an efficiency that really didn't have a demand. How do you get research on something like that?
Well, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to liken to a similar situation, or you compare it to, another market.
In fact, so many of the mobile apps nowadays, and what's happening with, I mentioned healthcare earlier, but even fintech. I was in a Walmart the other day, and of course now it's a case where you can take your smartphone and shop with it and not even go through a work your own cash register. Forget that. You just walk out with the merchandise, and it takes it right out of your bank account automatically.
Right. Well, education is certainly a big part of what we do for clients, and what a lot of new companies need. You have to educate about the problem. What is it? What is the problem? And then, of course, they have the solution. And one of the strategies that we deploy pretty regularly is content. 2013 has really been all about content. You've got to have unique, digestible, consumable content that folks understand, and you want to relate to your audience in a way that captures their attention when oftentimes they're drinking from the fire hose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, talk a little bit about, you covered it a little bit, but maybe go a little deeper for our listeners about how somebody with the size and the cloud and the number of sophisticated marketing campaigns that you're supporting and managing. How do you how do you evolve and stay at the edge in such a fast-paced industry?
Well, we have to be just as fast-paced, and we have to be just as responsive. And, it's been said before, the knowledge economy, but, we're always reading. We're always looking at conferences. We're always on webinars. We're trying to stay as current as we possibly can with everything that is
And sometimes you're doing all three or four of them at the same time, right?
Yes, we are, but we're lucky that we're a team of 20 or so, and so, everyone gains knowledge for the greater good.
Well, we're quickly running out of time, and the subject is so great, I'd love to be able to spend even more. Maybe we'll invite you back and have another opportunity to go even deeper into some of the discussion. But for our listeners who are responsible for marketing and responsible for the decision-making for their companies, what would be some of the things when it comes to marketing that should be on the top of their mind, especially a technology company, and give us a perspective both large and small?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mentioned it earlier, and I think it's worth repeating, but it is the reputation. Mm-hmm. If you're large, you've got to preserve it. You've got to protect it. If you're not, you've got to build one. You have to create one. And, everything you do, from your messaging, the solution, the platform, the application, whatever it is you provide, goes to your reputation. So, what you do and how you communicate it and how quickly you communicate it will certainly help, manage that. In some of these crowded markets, sometimes you look at differentiators, and there are a couple. There may not be major, but, the biggest differentiator is, do you outmarket them? And maybe you do. And it could be deploying guerrilla tasks. It could be, being aggressive and thinking outside of the envelope. It could be deploying creative or messages that stand out in your industry that, push the envelope.
Well, let's talk a little bit about pushing the envelope. Talk to us now about out-of-the-box concepts, the exciting things that are happening as far as your technology clients and specifically what's going on now and over the next year. Yeah,
as I mentioned before, now it's content. So, we're looking at things that capture attention, whether it's videos, whether it's infographics, very visual, soundbite type of things. We think more and more we'll look into gamification, even in the B2B world, what are some gamification-type concepts and applications that can be used for marketing and education. Definitely since that will become more and more part of the norm, and as, more and more technology evolves, there will be some easy platforms for folks to, develop campaigns and get them out there. But we're seeing an increased appetite for that.
Well, Genna, obviously, again, the subject is both broad and deep, and right now it's actually, I guess, multiplying upon itself. As you've mentioned already a couple of times in our discussion, that the dynamics are literally fluid, and there's so much change going on that it's fast-paced is almost an understatement. And, the joke would be it's so 5 minutes ago. Yeah. But, again, one of the things I think is really crucial for our listening audience to know is the role that you've played in so many of the startup, part of the startup organization. And tell us a little bit about, from a female startup situation. You've got something that's on the horizon. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, we do. As part of ATA, there's an initiative called LP2X, and it is a launch pad initiative for women entrepreneurs. And it's an amazing course. It's a 3-part series where women apply to be a part of the course, and their sessions are broken down into 3 different days in the fall. The second session was actually just this past week, in fact, where, these ladies learn real-life lessons from real-life success stories. We look at everything from funding, different types of funding, to presentation skills, to, way beyond a business plan in terms to writing a term sheet, those types of things. It's been amazing to watch the companies that are going through there.
And coming up in the fourth quarter, is it Startopia?
Startopia.
Tell us a little bit about that. That sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah, sure. So Startopia is an initiative that we've created here, and it really is sort of a portal, one-stop shop, so to speak, to bring together emerging companies, academia, capitalists, and service providers, to startups. So often we find these emerging companies need a lot of guidance. They're not exactly sure where to start, and so we would like to give them one place where they can go and get started. Find the resources they need to fuel their idea and bring it to market quicker.
Well, Genna, again, thank you so much for all of the things that you do for the greater community, certainly for the great work that you've done over the years for your clients, but also from our perspective, thank you for taking time out of, I know, a very busy schedule to spend a few minutes with us on Tech Talk today.
Sure, great. I enjoyed it.